Welcome to San Joaquin Spotlight, a public affairs program featuring conversations about life in the central San Joaquin Valley. This program is brought to you in partnership between KFSR 90.7 FM and CMAC Fresno. I'm your host, Sevag Tateosian. Today, the studio's buzzing with activity with volunteers making this show happen. But our guest this week is Robert Snow, PhD, Dr. Snow. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Sevag. It's great to be here.
You're with an organization called Fresno Audubon Society. Tell us a little bit about this organization.
Okay, well, Audubon, a lot of people are aware of Audubon, if not any other way than through the magazine, the Audubon Society magazine. Audubon was started in the 19th century. There were some societies that were named after John James Audubon. Audubon has established himself as the premier artist illustrating the birds of America. And so his name was associated with birds. In the 19th century, there was a movement to use birds for fashion as well as for eating. At the time that people started thinking about protecting birds, the passenger pigeon was declining, became extinct. Ladies were wearing egret feathers. Birds were being killed by the thousands to provide this fashion. And also birds of all types were being killed wild and sold for food. Like you could go into New York City and find robins for sale in a market.
I mean, I don't mean to stop you, but this is a very interesting conversation you've brought up. I mean, there was a time where you could find all these birds on the market for eating?
And you still can in many parts of the world, around the Mediterranean area. Songbirds are killed in their migration by the hundreds of thousands and eaten. There was an environmental movement starting in the 19th century, you know, the formation of the national parks, and people decided that it was time to sort of take action. So they started an organization called Audubon Society, but it sort of fell on the wayside. Then in the early 20th century, chapters began to form again for the protection of birds. And so basically today, Audubon is a bunch of individual chapters. There are 500 chapters of Audubon in America. There are 49 in California. So and we're organized by local chapter because Audubon feels that work is really best done at the local level. So we have the local chapters and we have the state organization. There's a California Audubon, and then there's also the National Audubon. And now National Audubon is a very large, very well respected environmental organization. Since it's been around since 1905, the budget of National Audubon itself is almost $500 million a year. And National Audubon publishes the magazine. They also influence legislation to try to protect habitat, North Slope oil areas. We also are involved we've identified what we call important bird areas. These important bird areas are areas where specific birds have habitat that they need. Now, you know, it's hard to remember back, maybe you can remember back when you were young, how many birds there were then compared to now. And I'll bet your father can tell you stories about how many birds there were. My father used to tell me stories, and he was born in the 20s in Chico, of the sky being black with ducks. Now today, the only way to see that sky black with ducks is to go to a national wildlife refuge, like up around Sacramento, or we have some in Madera County. You can see that today, but that's the way it used to be all the time.
So we're seeing a decline in the number of birds, basically.
Yes, we're going to probably continue to see a decline because, you know, as we continue to modify and work with the world, we reduce the habitat that the birds need. So what Audubon wants to do, I mean, Audubon doesn't want to stop development. Audubon stands for working, and I'll tell you a little bit later about some of the programs that Audubon has with farmers and ranchers in California. It's a very important program called the Working Lands Program. So what we want to do is we want to think carefully about what can be done to sort of maximize the benefit to the environment for the birds. We don't want to stop development, but we want sensible development. We'd like to see infill rather than going out to untouched lands. I personally think that you mentioned the foothills as growing into the foothills earlier. The foothills are relatively marginal land compared to the valley floor, and it makes sense to me to put housing in that type of area as opposed to farmland. Farmland should be reserved for farming, but you want to you want to be sure that you're doing it in an area where you're not going to impact some endangered or threatened animal.
So in an ideal world, let's say that I have 30 acres of land west of Fresno somewhere, and I want to put housing in there. In a perfect world, how would that work with Audubon Society? Would you all contact me, or would I contact you and say, let's sit at the table and let's figure out a way that I can do this without impact?
If you approached Audubon, we would certainly consult with you, but if you're going to turn your farmland into housing, that's your right, it's your land, and you have every right to do so. Where Audubon, and Audubon doesn't stop people from developing lands. Audubon's more concerned with trying to restore habitat so the birds that are left can have a place to live. We work with farmers, for example, to put native plants in hedgerows on the edges of their farmlands. And the native plants then attract the native birds, and the native birds can act as insect pest control. It's something that's been very effective up north.
That's interesting. So instead of pesticide, you put native birds and they'll take care of the insect problem you're having.
You can't completely eliminate pesticides, but there's a fellow farmer here in Fresno who we do a census of the birds on his property. He's been doing this 4 times a year for the last 5 years. And he's convinced that, by planting native plants, we've shown that he's increased the native bird population, and he's using less pesticide. So it's effective.
We have some very interesting birds, and in a second, we're going to show one of the first pictures that you've brought. But we have some beautiful birds in this area. Do you think people underestimate or don't understand the value of the birds in this area?
Well, I'm sure they underestimate the number of birds in this area. If you just look around, you'll say, oh, there's a little brown bird. We call them LBJs, little brown jobs. There are literally hundreds and hundreds of bird species in this area. And when we go out on our bird walks, it's not uncommon to see 80 different species in a particular day.
So this bird right here.
Yeah, you asked me to bring 4 common birds. So the first bird that I put up there is actually a very uncommon bird. And I put it up there because it's under a lot of stress, and its existence is threatened right now.
I apologize for cutting you off, but when you say that, the first thing that pops in my head is we may lose this forever.
We may. This is called the tricolored blackbird. Today, when you go out in the fields, drive across the valley, you'll see huge flocks of blackbirds, and they're usually red-winged blackbirds or brewer's blackbirds, huge flocks of them. This bird, the tricolored blackbird, used to be the most common bird in the valley, but because of all of the changes to the valley floor, the removal of all the grasslands and the habitat that it bred in, it's become one of the rarest birds. And the colonies today, their breeding success is dropping off substantially. One of the things we have done recently with Audubon is to help a farmer protect those birds. There was a nesting colony in some silage, and he was about to harvest it for his cattle because his cattle needed food. And if he had done that, we would have lost this colony of over 5,000 birds. And if they don't breed, they won't continue to grow in population. So by donations, California Audubon came out and sent a message to all of its members. And this is the power of an organization the size of Audubon. We got a request to provide a little contribution. And with all those contributions of members of California Audubon, people were able to pay for food for the cows without actually destroying the colony. So it's a nice success story.
When that happened, and you realized, you know what, we have enough funds here to pay for food for these cows, what are you feeling at the time?
Well, I felt very happy to have been able to contribute something, and I was glad that we protected this colony. But it's just another example of the fight that we face trying to keep these birds going. It's increasingly difficult for them to find a place to breed.
You have a very interesting background. I mean, this is not your background per se. Talk about your education a little bit. I mean, you've done some incredible things in your career.
Oh, thank you. I was raised in Northern California in Chico, so I'm familiar with the valley, and that was an agricultural area. My father was in agriculture. He was an almond hull processor. In fact, he pioneered the method for feeding almond hulls to cattle, because before he started that business, they used to burn them, throw them away. And then there was a study at UC Davis saying that cattle could grow fat on almond hulls, and he made a business out of buying this waste product and turning it around. So I'm familiar with the struggles that farmers have. I grew up in an agricultural area. I grew up hunting and fishing. I was raised to appreciate the outdoors. And I had a John James Audubon book of the Birds of America, small little version, that my aunt gave me when I was young. So I grew up with the birds, looking at the birds. I was going to be an engineer, but I changed to biology in college because I liked it better. So I got a bachelor's degree in biology at Santa Barbara and became very interested in neuroscience. So I went on to graduate school, became a PhD in neuroscience, worked in neuroscience until I was 35, and then found it very, very difficult to get a job in my chosen field. So rather than struggle against long odds to become a professor at a research university, I got out of science essentially and went into the GPS industry. Worked in the GPS industry for 25 years and then retired at 58 and moved to Fresno, where my wife is from. So that's how I got here. I have a connection to the valley, not particularly to Fresno, but I love it here. I love the proximity of the mountains. And the birding is excellent. So how did I get interested in birding?
How someone like you with that background gets involved in birding? I mean, although everything you've mentioned has to do with the sky.
Well, yeah, it's true. I was interested in birds from the time I was young, but I took a class in birds as part of my biology degree. So I became interested in birds at that time, back in the 70s, and I'd always maintained this relationship with Audubon by subscribing to the magazine. So I was a member. Wherever I lived, I was a member of Audubon. When I moved to Fresno, I was looking for something to do. I was retired, and it's very different being retired after working very long hours for a long period of time. I wanted to give back. I wanted to be involved in charitable organizations. And Audubon just it happened upon me. A woman who was a bridge partner, my mother-in-law, was on the board of Audubon, and she said, "You really ought to look into joining the board of Audubon in Fresno." So I did, and that was in 2010. And that's how I got interested in Fresno Audubon in particular.
So let's take a look at one of the other pictures you brought and explain. I mean, I looked at this picture and I said, what a perfect picture he sent me.
This is a great picture. And by the way, I want to give credit to the photographer. These pictures are all taken by Gary Woods, one of our members. He has a very long lens and takes some excellent action shots, as you can see here. The bird on the left is a red-tailed hawk. The bird on the right is a prairie falcon. And I chose this picture not only because it's dynamic, but because the red-tailed hawk is the most common hawk that we have in the valley. If you're driving around on the valley floor or up in the foothills and you see a hawk, it's very often a red-tailed hawk. So it's something that people will see. And you think it would be easy to identify because it has a red tail, but in fact it's very difficult to identify in some cases because there's such variation in the birds, not only in their age but also in their sex, and they're just different morphologies of the bird. But
and the other one, what was the other bird?
The one on the right is a prairie falcon, which is another raptor, a smaller raptor, and the two are having a little confrontation there.
Wow, that's incredible. And one of the things, I'm glad you brought this picture because on the way to work, probably 4 times out of 5 days, I notice a hawk sitting on the telephone pole looking down at this, I don't know if there's animals in there, but this area where a farmer has turned into different crops, and he or she hangs out up on the pole looking down, and I never see him or her fly, but every time I pass by, there it is. It's looking down. What's it doing, in your opinion?
They spend a lot of time doing that because they're very visual predators, and they'll look for motion. And there are a lot of little mice and voles and other small mammals which are their primary diet, and they're just looking for that motion. If they see it, they'll pounce on it.
How fast do they come down? Because I imagine once it sees something move, oh, get out of its way.
It's very fast. They're not the fastest. The red-tailed hawk is not the fastest by any means. The prairie falcon is quite a bit faster. but they can get going, several hundred miles an hour in a fall dive.
Do you ever hear people shooting these hawks or birds with a BB gun when they see them? And why should they not do that?
Well, number one, it's against the law. But number two, there's no reason to kill a living thing except possibly to eat it, in my opinion. Killing just to kill is not really very sporting. It doesn't teach, I think, good ethics to children to let them kill just to kill. I have no problem with hunting for birds. In fact, some of the best environmentalist stewards are hunters because they want to protect the environment. And so as long as you eat the bird, I don't see a problem with it.
See, and my biggest fear is one day someone's going to see this hawk. It's a beautiful thing. And is going to decide, you know what, I'm going to try to shoot it and do whatever. And hopefully it doesn't go there. But what happens in cases like that when your organization gets word of something like this? Do you report it to the authorities, or what happens?
In my experience, we've never really had that happen. We get phone calls often for injured birds. And unfortunately, there's not much that we can do about an injured bird. There is a Fresno wildlife rehabilitation program where birds that can no longer live in the wild are taken in by volunteers, and sometimes I'll forward the information to them. There's not much that we can really do, unfortunately.
So let's take a look at the third photograph that you brought. And I mean, very colorful, very yellow. What kind of bird is this?
These are American goldfinches, and they're on a little bag feeder full of a thistle seed called Niger. This was taken in a backyard, and I brought it because it shows that you can feed birds in your yard, and you could have this in your yard. All you need to get was one of these little socks that they sell them in pet stores or online, fill it up with Niger seed and hang it out there, and you'll get a flock of goldfinches coming through and eating from it.
But like, if I did this, what are the chances that I'm going to get a few birds eating? I mean, will they know what it is?
They'll find it. You put it out and you won't see anything maybe for a few days, but if there's a flock in the neighborhood, they will find it, and pretty soon they'll know it's there. And then you become a slave to feeding your wild birds. It can take a lot of time and effort.
In your opinion, is this a good thing? I mean,
yes.
Does that help the environment and the birds?
It helps the birds, particularly what we like to do is feed them during the migration. California is on the Pacific Flyway. There's a huge number of birds that travel from the Arctic down to South America every year to get away from the cold, and they go down in the warm in the winter, and then they go back up and they breed in the summer. And in that flyway, they need to feed on that migration. And we do believe in providing food responsibly anyway to birds.
Why should we care about birds? I know that we had a chuckle about this question off camera because, it's an interesting question. Why should we care?
It is. It's a very simple question, and my first reaction was, well, for me it's obvious because they're living things, and as a person who's loved the outdoors and biology and things my whole life, I just cherish living things, and I would hate to see an animal disappear forever, because once an animal goes extinct, it's gone forever. The passenger pigeon used to be billions of them, and we thought they would never be gone, and yet they're gone today. Other birds have gone extinct. Once they're gone, and that's a sad thing. I like to think, too, about birds giving us an idea of what's in store for us in the future. You've heard of the canary in the coal mine. Well, that's a bird that is used by miners as a warning when the environment is turning bad. So the birds today are giving us a little bit of a warning. They're moving north at different times as our use of carbon-based fuels heats the atmosphere. And so it's giving us a warning of what could be in store for us as well. They have the flexibility of being able to move. They can just fly to a different area. We don't necessarily have that flexibility. So, I love birds because they're beautiful. I love birds because they're alive, they're natural. But they also are a major part of our environment, and they bring us joy. My mother-in-law, who's 87 years old, likes to sit in the kitchen table and look at the bird feeder and just see the birds come. It just gives her great joy.
The foothills. You do trips up there or field trips? Your organization is involved in taking field trips.
We have field trips, yes, primarily on Wednesdays, but not exclusively. And People can find out about our field trips either on our Facebook page or on our website. We have a calendar there. So primarily we do this in the wintertime. Summer's too hot. So our field trip season is September through June. Our last field trip this year will be in the middle of June. It'll be up to Shaver Lake. So we go in various places. We go out to the national wildlife refuges. We go up in the foothills. We go on raptor runs, or we cross the Madera grasslands and see how many hawks we can count. And we go out to Lost Lake Park. We have a lot of different places that are favorites with us.
Eagles.
Mm-hmm.
We are accustomed to seeing hawks
Mm-hmm.
when we're driving up the foothill. Me, on the way to work, I see one. But eagles, is
Mm-hmm.
that a different story?
They're not nearly as common as red-tailed hawks, but you can certainly see them, especially around Millerton, the San Joaquin River. There are bald eagles on Millerton Lake. There are golden eagles up in the foothills I see regularly.
Interesting. You have a newsletter as well.
We
Talk
do.
about
We
the
have a newsletter called The Yellow Bill, and it's in its 56th, I think, edition or something like that. It's been around as long as Fresno Audubon has been. And it's something that we give out freely. You don't have to be a member. We post it on our website. You can read it. You can sign up for our newsletter. And if you sign up for our email communications, you'll get a notice when the newsletter is available, and then you can download it.
So your last picture that you brought, let's
Mm-hmm.
take a look at it. And you know, I actually have seen one of these,
Mm-hmm.
and it flew very fast,
Mm-hmm.
and it was doing the same thing that this picture was doing in my backyard. So by the time I got my camera, because I was trying to be very slow to take a picture, it had already gone and flown away. So what is this?
This is an Anna's hummingbird, and I chose this because it's what we call a resident hummingbird. We have a lot of different hummingbirds that migrate through, and if you have a hummingbird feeder in your yard, and you look closely, you'll see that in the wintertime, these are the hummingbirds that you see, but this time of year, you're likely to see a large variety of different hummingbirds. You can easily attract hummingbirds to your yard with plants like you see here, or with a hummingbird feeder, and they're very simple to fill. You can make your own solution. You don't have to buy the stuff in the stores. It's just 3 parts water to 1 part sugar. You boil it so it doesn't develop bacteria and things, and you fill your feeder with it. And once they get used to it, you'll find that the numbers increase. So you may have a pair in your yard, and then in a couple of years you might have 2. And then pretty soon they'll be eating you out of house and home.
How do you, I don't know if you can answer this question, but some people kind of get mad at the birds for eating the vegetables that they have in the backyard. Or like I have grapes, and someone told me the other day, be careful, you're going to get a bird that's going to eat those grapes. I mean, what do I need to do to make sure that I get to see birds, but that my grapes aren't eaten by birds?
That's a real problem. Birds can be real pests with agriculture. Crows are particularly bad. And a lot of birds do eat grapes. I think it's very difficult to grow in Fresno. It's difficult to grow things in your yard because not only because of the birds, but because of the squirrels that come around. You have to protect your fruits and your vegetables somehow. I have bird netting that I put over my Fuyu persimmon tree, and that seems to work. But before I did that, they would come and they'd peck it just enough to put a hole in it and make it fall off the tree. So yeah, it can be a problem. There's no doubt.
Are we in a good spot for birds? I mean, the valley.
It's fantastic.
Is this a good spot compared to some of the other places?
It's fantastic because we're on the Pacific Flyway. So you can go out in the wintertime and see all kinds of birds that are on their way from one place to another.
Sometimes when I'm in my backyard or even when I'm in my home, I hear this loud, there's several birds up, they're flying together, and they make this loud noise. What could that bird be?
Is it a goose? I hear geese a lot.
And where did they go?
Well, the Canada geese they're an interesting story because originally they used to migrate, but there are now resident populations, and we have those in Fresno. They don't migrate anymore. They're here year-round, and they go from one ponding basin to another, and they'll eat grass and things, and they can be messy.
When the weather's hot for us, let's say it's 110 degrees for us, and it's hot, we don't want to be outside. Where are the birds during that time?
They're usually in the shade. If you're going to bird in the summer, usually go out break of dawn before it's cool. You'll see a lot of activity then. but they are not so active during the heat of the day.
But are they in their nests? I've always wondered this question because
They're only in their nests when they're breeding. That's in the spring. As soon as the young have fledged, the nest is abandoned.
I want to talk about nests a little bit. I love when I get nests in my tree because I like to watch, just see what happens with the nest. But, what advice would you give for someone with a nest in their backyard? I mean, how do you make sure you're not coming too close? Because I think that's happened too with me.
It's possible, but I think the birds, if the bird's going to build the nest low to the ground, it's probably not too concerned. I have nests in my front yard of mourning doves. They nest in the rafters of the house. They also nest in the trees. And I have northern mockingbirds nesting as well. And they don't seem to be bothered by me. The best thing to do if you see a nest, the question we get all the time is about the baby bird that's out of the nest. People normally say, okay, there's a nest, I'm going to leave it alone. But they want to know what to do if they find a bird on the ground. And somehow the idea got around that the mother will ignore the baby if it's touched by a human. That isn't true. The best thing to do is to put the little bird that can't fly back in the nest, and then it'll get fed and can continue
I've
on.
heard that before because someone has told me if you touch the bird, then the mom is not going to take care of it anymore.
Not true. Not true.
Tell us how people can get in touch with you, your organization. Call to action. What do you want from our audience?
Well, if we'd love to have you become involved with Fresno Audubon, either as a member or just to find out what's going on. We have general meetings, except during the summer. So our season is over until next fall. You can go to our website, which is fresnoaudubon.org, and we have a calendar on there of activities. We have pictures of birds. We have lists of the members of our board, and you can become involved primarily in what we primarily do. We're a birding club. We are not a large, we're not a chapter that does a lot of restoration, habitat protection, things like that. We don't really take a lot of stands locally on issues particularly. Although we may be doing a little more of that. We'd like to get involved in this. You saw the tricolor blackbird. We would like to get more involved in looking for them up in the foothills. We're doing some work with the Yosemite area Audubon, and they have found these tricolor blackbirds breeding in the foothills, and we're hoping to find ways to encourage them to move up into the foothills where they can breed safely instead of down in the silage.
Dr. Snow, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Oh, you're very welcome.
That's all for this edition of San Joaquin Spotlight. To the volunteer crew that made this and every production possible, thank you. We couldn't do this without you. To our guest, Dr. Robert Snow, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Thank you for having me.
That's all for this edition. To our audience members watching on CMAC, Comcast, and AT&T, or listening to us on KFSR Radio, thank you for joining us this week. We'll be back next week with a new edition.